Psychology is fascinating. So fascinating it's become one of the most popular studied subjects in the UK. Why? Because it's all about people. You and me, we can all relate to it. It's the scientific study of the mind, including why our minds function in the way that they do. Psychologists attempt to explain why we do what we do and how we feel. Some of the different approaches to psychology include cognitive and behavioural psychology, developmental psychology, physiological psychology and individual differences, and social psychology. Whatever the approach is used, the findings are always based on research. These main methods of research are case studies, experiments, observations, and surveys and interviews. Now let's go back over to Will in the studio to find out more.
We can all learn better coping mechanisms, and then we can reduce the stress in our lives. In 1956, Hans Selye was carrying out research into the effects of hormones. He noticed that the rats he was using became ill even when they were given harmless placebo injections. He said it was the stress of having a daily injection that caused the rats to become ill. Selye said that all animals and humans go through a 3-stage physiological response. He called it the GAS, General Adaptation Syndrome. The 3 stages are alarm. When we see something frightening, we are aroused. We produce more adrenaline, and this prepares us for fight or flight. Resistance. We adapt to a high-pressure situation and learn to cope with it, although we may still be producing more adrenaline. Exhaustion. After long-term exposure to stressors, we may not be able to cope anymore and become ill. We may have stress-related illnesses such as high blood pressure or stomach ulcers. Ulcers are actually caused by bacteria, but stress weakens the immune system, so could be an important factor. Have you noticed that some people get more colds around exam time?
Physiological methods to cope with stress. There are various drugs that can slow the activity of the nervous system and make us feel relaxed. Anti-anxiety drugs, such as benzodiazepines, can do this. The sympathetic nervous system makes the heart rate and blood pressure increase. Beta blockers can slow the effects of the sympathetic nervous system, so they counteract these changes. Drugs can be prescribed by a doctor and they act quickly, but they only really treat symptoms, not the cause of the stress, and they may themselves cause problems such as side effects or be addictive.
The individual differences approach in psychology is about exploring why we're different from each other in the way that we behave or respond to various situations. Of course, we're all different because of our unique combination of genes and the effects of being brought up differently. So clearly, we're all a product of our genes and our environment. We refer to this as the interaction between nature and nurture. Of course, when we start to think about how we all react differently, we're starting to talk about what behaviour we consider normal. How else can we measure behavioural differences but by exploring the concept of normality? So, we're going to begin this section talking about psychological abnormality. So, what's normal? Abnormality can be defined as statistically rare behaviour. If the majority, about 95% of people behave in a certain way, it's referred to as normal. If only a small percentage of the population behave in a particular way, it's described as abnormal.
Social psychologists look at how people behave in groups and why they can end up conforming with the rest of the group. When members of a group do this, they are responding to a social pressure. Social psychologists also study why people are obedient, even when they're being asked to do something that they know is wrong. This branch of psychology uses field experiments. This is where the studies are in everyday real situations, such as a street. But the participants shouldn't know that they're being studied, so the person carrying out the survey can watch people without the participants realising it, or they may even lie about the real nature of the survey or experiment. Hence, these methods can be criticised for being unethical, as the participants can't give informed consent. The catch is, if you told the participants that you were really watching them, they'd change their behaviour, so the study would no longer be natural.
In 1951, Ash carried out a very famous experiment into conformity. 50 male college students were given a task. They were shown a line and then asked to match it to one of 3 other lines. Confederates were used to mislead students. The Confederates answered first and said a wrong answer. Then, when it was the turn of the real participants, they were baffled. So they gave the same wrong answer. So they didn't appear to be different. They abandoned their own beliefs in order to conform. This is an example of conforming to the majority. This was a rather contrived situation, but there are examples of more real-to-life situations where people have conformed. In one, people sat in a room waiting to be interviewed. They saw smoke coming from under a door, but when one made a move, Confederates said, "We can't go, we were told to wait," and everyone carried on waiting.
When you've got quantitative data, make sure you put your data into tables. Give each table a number, such as Table 1.1, and an informative title. This is really useful because you can also graph your data. Bar graphs are used to represent discrete data. There should be gaps between the bars, rather like this one. You could use histograms. These look like bar graphs without the gaps and are for continuous data, so their numbers are on the x-axis. Line graphs can also be used for continuous data and are often preferred for comparing 2 sets of data. Next, a scattergram or scatter graph. Now, these are used to see if there's any correlation between 2 variables. To find the 3 measures of central tendency, you need to do the following. First, the mean. Add all the values and divide by the number in the sample. So, for example, the mean of 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10 and 12 is 51 divided by 7, which is 7.29. Secondly, the median. The number in the middle of a data set when the data are put in numerical order. So the median of these numbers, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10 and 12, is 7. Lastly, the mode. Now, this is the category that occurs most often in a data set. So here, the mode of 3, 4, 6, 4, 8, 9 and 4 is 4. But sometimes averages can be misleading. If we add up the numbers of children in a large number of families and find the average, we may end up with a number like 2.4. Now, obviously no one has 0.4 of a child. That would be mental.